Again, Copernicus. We're going now again. We're going from humanism, which is not science, it's more logic. Now we're going to science. And Copernicus is the first one, using math.
Should you use math to go against church?
Not really going against church authority. It should be more church authority against math, shouldn't it? Because a guy doing
Math
math,
is just like proving.
Copernicus used math to say, look, it makes a lot more sense mathematically if we take the Earth from the center of the universe and put the sun there. Then mathematically plotting the orbits, the paths of all these heavenly bodies is a lot simpler. So really, we'll see a pattern here. Every time somebody comes up with something that makes sense but disagrees with the church, it's not math against the church. Scientists are not trying to attack the church. Scientists are humanists. They're just curious. And church authority feels threatened by that. Remember, when did Copernicus publish his discovery that the Earth was not at the center of the universe?
When he died.
He left a note. After I die, I published this book. Because it was dangerous. Because it threatened the church authorities. If you had been teaching something for 1,000 years, and suddenly somebody had evidence that you were wrong, and your authority was threatened by that, wouldn't you worry about people finding these things out? But it was mathematical. And again, Copernicus in his preface to his book, dedicated to the Pope, mentions, really only those who understand mathematics will understand what I'm saying. My hope is that mathematics will read this. Mathematicians will read this. Because his point was, the language of truth is mathematics, because it's clear and we can all see it. So what did he do?
Does it say about you?
Ptolemaic, P-T-O-L-E-M, Ptolemy. And Ptolemy is the mathematician, astronomer, ancient Greek. Ptolemaic is the adjective. Too hot?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. So, this is not what Copernicus argued. This is what the church had been teaching. The Earth is at the center. Ptolemy just put the sun in the center, and it made much more sense. But he was still, mathematically, his math was still complicated because he still did have the medieval Christian Catholic teachings worldview, which said God created the universe perfectly, therefore, circles, perfect circles, that's the way everything has to move. So he made his math way complicated by assuming that everything moved in perfect circular orbits. That's it with Copernicus. Now, okay, Lauren, Julia, let's get back to your. I know it's because you guys are the Bobbsey twins.
We're twins? Our names don't even start with the same letter.
I know, it's just you're always together. You're together in my head.
So, like,
More religious.
I don't
Now you guys just have to. You guys have to sort of go through a mental checklist for each one of these main ideas. Is there any moral teaching that comes out of the fact that the Earth is no longer the center of the universe? Does that? Well, but does that change our view of right and wrong, good and evil? Not really. So don't force something. Okay? This is like real thinking. Don't sit there and make stuff up because, oh, it has to work for all three of these factors. No, you have to think about the factors. Does it change the traditional religious view?
Yes.
Yes. Tell me how. The earth is no longer the center of the universe. Sarah, you said it a second ago.
Mechanistic. Man's not great.
I don't know if you can see that. It says man is not the center of the universe. We have been taught for 1,000 years that God put us in the middle of the creation, and the whole creation was us. Book of Genesis. And that was very comforting. God was up there, we're right in the middle, everything else goes around us, and it's all for us. We are the center of the universe and the highest creatures on it, and God cares. Suddenly we're not the center of the universe. And religiously, that's disturbing. Scientifically, gee, did this have any, what is science? Knowledge, fact, natural world. Did this have any effect, Copernicus's discovery, on our understanding of science and the natural world?
Yeah.
Duh, of course. Right? We understand the solar system a little more now. It's no longer the geosystem, it's the solar system. Notice how solar, sun, it's the sun system now, right? Everything goes around the sun. All right, so. Kepler comes along. Is Kepler as important as Galileo, as Copernicus? No, why not? Well, okay, you're right. I won't beat this dead horse. But what did Kepler do that makes us remember him? What's up? He did see another star. Very strange things happening in the heavens. They were, what were they? They were supernovas. Exploding, collapsing stars. Very bright, you could see them. Galaxies away. Supernova, a new star in the sky. You could even see one of them during the day. Two guys saw these over 15, 20 years, right after Copernicus. And that's not supposed to happen either, because God's supposed to have created the universe complete. So why are there new stars in the sky if God created the complete universe? That's really scary. But that's not the main thing with Kepler.
God didn't make universe perfect.
Good, okay. Remember, we can all check each other's math. We don't say Copernicus is right because we worship Copernicus. We say Copernicus is right if we check his math and it's good. It was better than Ptolemy's math, but Kepler checked his math. And he said, you know what? It's hard to explain this. It's hard to explain how you can make math prove something by making your equations more and more complicated until it proves perfect circles. So I'm not going to even try to explain it to you. I'll just ask you to try to understand that Kepler said, you know, if we throw out this insistence, this like dogma, this refusal to think in any other way about how the planets orbit, if we throw out this idea that it has to be circular, the math is a lot simpler now. And he proved by math that this is better mathematically than this. That's not a perfect circle. An ellipsis, an ellipsis. Planets move in orbits that are not a perfect circle, they are ellipses. And his math, and everybody checked his math and they're like, you know what, you're right, the math is so much simpler now. It explains everything so much better. Better explanation, that's what science is always looking for, a better explanation that can be demonstrated through math. So that's all with Kepler, really. But it's the march of science. You're seeing how one scientist, mathematician, can correct another one. The way it moves, its orbit. So is there anything about Kepler? Okay, we just talked about Kepler. Is there anything about Kepler? Moral? You see any like huge moral consequences of elliptical orbits? No, so good, you don't have to write about that. How about religious? Are there any, does it have any consequences of the way we were taught about the truths?
The perfect universe created by God.
Perfect circles.
Yeah, and I just have to assume that thinking Christians of the day were like, well, big deal. Who said that that circles are more perfect than ellipses? Why are we circleists? You know, like, why are we prejudiced towards circles? What's wrong with an ellipsis? Why is it less perfect? But anyway, but yeah, if you are going to say that perfection requires a perfect circle, then suddenly the universe is imperfect. What's the last thing that Kepler did, though, as far as science goes? What does he show us about science?
Can be proved.
It can be proved, and again, now think about him, because Kepler is, not Galileo. Think about Kepler in relation to Copernicus. Copernicus mathematically proved something. Kepler came along and did what? It shows us something about how science works. The beginnings of science, huh?
Corrected by math.
Corrected, improved. Science is never absolutely true, because you can always find new evidence that improves your understanding. And Kepler's an example of that. All right, finally now Galileo. And Galileo is huge. All right, so now we're 150 years after Pico said we can be higher than angels. 160 years afterwards. And Galileo, what does Galileo do?
He used the telescope to see the solar system.
I wish I would have added in your essay question, and it would be nice to notice this. Think of technology. The Reformation would not have happened without one technological invention. What was it? The printing press. Everybody could make copies of the 95 Theses, and they started spreading across Europe. Here, take this. Stick it in your shoe. Don't let anybody from the Inquisition find it, and show it to people in the next town. Galileo, without the telescope, which was a child's toy. This guy in Holland made it as a toy. Oh, look at that, it makes things close. And children are like, oh, whippy, whippy, yee. And Galileo, he read about it, and he was like, I'm going to make one, and I'm going to start looking up there. And he did. And it went from being a toy to something that overthrew, again, our understanding of the universe. Because what did he see when he looked through the telescope?
Craters on sunspots.
All sorts of things. And again, it's like gravity. Gravity, so what? Think about it, it is deep. The moon, according to Genesis, is one of two lights that God put in the sky. God put two lights in the sky for man, to light man's world in the center of the small universe. The sun and the moon, two lights. If I can see shadows on the moon when I look through this children's toy, and craters, seeing shadows tells me that it's not a light. Because you can't make a shadow appear on a fire. You can't make a shadow appear on a flashlight. You can't do it. Light does not allow shadows. So obviously the moon is reflecting light from the sun. And if you stood on the moon and the sun was over there, the moon would reflect all that light. There's the sun, I'm the moon, and there you are. There's the sun. The light hits me and it reflects to you. But if somebody is standing right here, it's going to cast a shadow from the sun. And you're going to see that shadow. And that's going to prove to you that it's not light. And that's so, okay, so Newton was like, oh my goodness, the moon is not a light. Sunspots. The sun's supposed to be perfect. The sun has these brown spots on it. Jupiter has moons. Not only one moon, 12 moons. And he didn't see them all at once. He kept looking like night after night after night and seeing more and more stuff. And oh my God, 12 moons around Jupiter. Saturn had rings.
Weren't
Jupiter, were they like surprised that they had more moons than Earth, or just that they had moons?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I would be surprised by both. A, that it has moons, because 150 years ago it was a piece of ether rolling around in a glass ball, a crystalline sphere.
So they're saying like in the Bible it said there was only one moon and one sun. There's more moons, so it's not.
And if Jupiter has moons, that means Jupiter and Earth has moons. Well, gee, Jupiter's a planet too. Good Lord. And this is looking forward to who? Bruno. Bruno starts saying, well, if there are other planets with moons just like ours, maybe they have people on them too. Maybe God didn't just create other planets and other moons. Maybe he created other people too. And Bruno was burned for that.
Was Jupiter discovered before Galileo?
Yeah, as a planet, you could always see it. Okay, morally. Does this change our view of right, wrong, good, evil?
No.
Does this change our view? Religion, what do we mean by that? Our relationship to God. Our understanding of God.
The church.
God's attitude towards us. Does it change our religious view?
Yes.
Give me some ways. Okay, well,
And Earth is not special since we have.
that would be more science, wouldn't it? Because that's a natural, by science we're talking about natural facts, truths about the natural world. That's what science does. It observes and seeks truth about the natural world, about nature. Natural law moves the heavens, Newton. That's a scientific fact. But how do those scientific facts disturb the religious understanding?
God didn't give moon as light.
The moon's not a light. Genesis, wait.
The Bible is the word of God, and the Bible lies.
William, thank you for talking, but please do it a little bit louder. I've told you a million times, I really am pretty deaf.
The Bible is God's word, and because the Bible lies, it kind of seems like God lies.
Lies is probably not the word anybody would use, but is inaccurate. Has mistakes. So the book of Genesis, we've got evidence, scientific evidence, that Genesis is factually untrue. What about the moons of Jupiter?
Earth is not special because we have moons.
Earth is not special. There are other planets with moons. Earth is not the only one. The universe God gave us is much bigger. Remember, Galileo was a Christian. Now, if the story is from 1300 to 1700, the modern world slowly came into being through science. What did this modern birth of the modern world, what did it threaten? The modern world came from a more traditional world. So we've got to ask, what was the response of the medieval Catholic Church to all of these modern facts coming out more and more and more? Because they are undermining, they're undercutting, they're weakening the Church's position, its authority, its credibility, trustworthiness. Again and again and again, it's not right, it's not right, it's not right. What did the Church do to Galileo?
Made him stop studying science.
Galileo said all of these things that are against what the Church taught, against Church dogma, again that word, D-O-G-M-A, truths that we say are true based on authority, not evidence. It's just something that we all agree is true.
What was the opposite word of
Dogma, Well, a dogmatic person is one who believes what the authority says no matter what. And a skeptical person is one who keeps their mind open and is aware of ambiguities and things like that. So, Galileo announces all these things that disagree with the church. Therefore, by definition, you need to go get some water, LG? You're starting to fade. Go get some water. By definition, what is Galileo? He is saying things that are against the church, that are against church.
Heretic.
Not against the church, against church teaching, that disagree with church teaching. He's not against the church, he's a Christian, but it's against the church's teachings. So he is a heretic. And what does the church do to heretics?
Inquisition.
Inquisition. And what did the Inquisition do to Galileo?
Made him swear that he won't study science.
It didn't make him swear he wouldn't study. Huh?
To the public.
One sub raised his hand.
They made him say like everything he did was wrong.
Retracted. I take it back. I retract. I take everything back. Everything I said was heresy. I'm wrong. Now please don't. Now please just be nicer to me.
He said that.
Because again, the Inquisition was, as you saw in the Elizabeth movie, for example, torture was a tool of the Inquisition. One way or another, they would make you stop threatening the traditional order. So Galileo, given the choice of torture, possible death, or not, took it back. He retracted everything he said. He said, Jupiter doesn't have moons, the sun is not the center of the universe, moon is a light, yada, yada, yada. I take it all back, I'm a heretic. I was deceived. And he spent the last 10 years of his life in prison in his house. Now, what was Galileo's reaction when the church and the Inquisition were calling him a heretic? How did he respond? What did he, Lauren?
The people don't have to like change their minds because they need somewhere to rely on.
Okay, so A, he said, I agree with you, church, that these facts are disturbing because we have interpreted the Bible scientifically for 1,000 years. But he said something else that goes back to the Council of Trent. Who can tell me? The Council of Trent. The Council of Trent is so important. Martin Luther started the Reformation. The church said, oh my God, we've got a religious revolution on our hands. Let's hold an emergency meeting where we're going to announce these things in response to Martin Luther. What were the things that the Council of Trent said? Like 4. First of all, Luther was saying, we don't need the Pope. Remember, the Pope excommunicated him, right? So he's like, we don't need him. He's corrupt. He's not a man of God. We don't need the Catholic Church anymore. So how did the Council of Trent answer that? Luther saying, we don't need the Pope. He's not the authority anymore. Council of Trent, a Catholic response was,
We do.
the Pope is the authority. Okay, that's simple. And Luther is wrong. Another thing the Council of Trent did. Luther's interpreting the Bible differently. He's saying that everybody can read the Bible and interpret it themselves.
There is only one.
Not based on the dogma that the church says is true. Church dogma. There can be other interpretations. And the church said,
There's only one.
there's only one interpretation of the Bible, and it's the one that the Catholic Church has given. And so when Galileo, and again, this is 175 years later, when Galileo said, look, I'm a Christian too, but can't we interpret the Bible differently? What did the Catholic Church and the Inquisition say?
We can't.
No, because the Council of Trent, church law. There's only one interpretation. You cannot disagree. And finally, when Martin Luther, when the Council of Trent was held, and this is good because really Think about it. The Council of Trent happened 150 years or more before, and it still matters 175 years later when Galileo comes along. Think about Martin Luther. He wrote his 95 Theses. Very, very dangerous. He's like throwing hand grenades at the church. 95 of them. I've got 95 thesis statements, arguments that I could write an essay about, arguing that the church is wrong and I'm right. 95 of them, hand grenades, all attacking church authority and church power. And that's a written work. What is the church going to do with that written work that's been copied by the printing press and published all over Europe? What is the church going to do with it? Index of Forbidden Books.
Is it now Luther, not Galileo?
This is from the Council of Trent, which was, in response to Luther, the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Counter-Reformation. Luther was the Reformation, the Catholic response was the Counter-Reformation, which the Council of Trent basically defined. And so they made an index list of forbidden books. You can bet the first book on the list was 95 Theses. That's forbidden. Don't read it. And Galileo's book was put on the index of forbidden books. And people in Italy were told, you cannot read that. If you own it, give it back.
Also, there are other books listed on that forbidden book.
Yeah, it's a list, an index. Just like in the back of a book, the index, a list of all these things. You know when Galileo's book was taken off of the index of forbidden books? It was written around 1666, say? Take a guess. When did the Catholic Church say, okay, go ahead, read Galileo? 1992.
Eh?
When we're two?
When I was born?
One?
When I was born.
The Index of Forbidden Books.
Why?
That's really recent.
Why did
Galileo's
Galileo's
books
books
were
were
taken
alive?
But why did they take it out? Isn't it still against the church?
You tell me, why would the church in 1992 say, okay, I guess you can read a book that says that the sun is the center of the universe?
Nobody will listen to them?
They started believing it too.
Because it became already.
It's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the church had a choice. We can continue looking anti-science, even about the most common sense thing, the earth goes around the sun. Or we can modernize. We can modernize. We can change and adapt to modern scientific truth.
How come it took over 300 years to...
That's a great question. I would love to read about it. And I'm sure you could do an internet search and find answers to that. What other books are on the Index of Forbidden Books? It's a great question. So by talking about Galileo, we just went back to Martin Luther and the Reformation and the Council of Trent and all that stuff. It's a story. It's a story.
So what did Council of Trent told Galileo about these ideas?
It wasn't the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent was a meeting that said, okay, we met and this is what we have to announce. Index of Forbidden Books, Pope is the authority. There's only one interpretation of the Bible, the Church's interpretation. And the Jesuit order is going to go out and start Christian schools all around the world and all that sort of thing. Teaching the Catholic Church's way. Stop fighting, girls. All right. So Galileo. Did we talk about Galileo, moral, religious? John, you need to go get some water. You came all the way here. Are you sleeping over there? Or you're just looking down playing with your pencil? You do that a lot. You're a thinking type. You need to look down and, yes, Galileo.
Hi.
Okay. We already did moral, scientific, religious for Galileo, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No.
No?
We didn't do
Only the
science.
religious.
Yeah, we didn't do scientific.
Do we need to do scientific? Didn't we just talk about it? Do I need to spell it out?
Yes.
Stop it. No, I don't. How did Galileo change? How did Galileo's discoveries challenge the scientific church dogma that explained nature? The church explanation of nature, in other words, church science, How did Galileo's discoveries change?
It is flaws.
Hmm?
It's wrong. It's true.
That a lot of natural explanations of nature from the church are obviously wrong. We just talked about them.
Isn't that religious? Not scientific.
It's both, isn't it? The fact that the sun is at the center of the universe, the solar system, is also a scientific fact.
all
Hello,
goes
it's an
together.
explanation of nature. It's a better understanding of how nature really is structured, right,
So for
Laura?
the scientific, it just gave new information, while for the church, it was kind of like when.
It's like you drop a pebble, you drop a little rock in a pond, and little ripples start coming out. So the scientific facts are Jupiter has moons, blah, 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 blah. The ripples are, oh my God, what does that mean about our place in the middle of the universe? Yada, 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 yada. Other planets having moons, maybe God created other races, yada, yada, yada. And if it hadn't been for the Council of Trent, maybe the church could have said, yeah, you're right, there are other ways to interpret things.
Is Catholic Trent like a meeting from the Inquisition, or is it like a separate?
But no, the Council of Trent was a meeting of bishops, cardinals, the Pope,